with the Voice Referendum coming up at some stage in the near future, you may have disagreements with your family, friends and co-workers, or there could be other major social or family issues that cause you and important people in your life to disagree. So how do we deal with those disagreements in a healthy way? How can we disagree amicably and avoid our disagreements causing deep, long-term rifts? To offer some guidance on this, you're joined by psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists. Good morning, Rachel.
Hi, Ashwin. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, this morning. This is a potentially spicy topic because people do care a lot about some of these big national issues. So I'm just wondering, as a psychologist, have you had to deal with patients who've had a relationship breakdown over political differences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during COVID, there was conflict in families around vaccines. I remember seeing that quite a bit. In fact, I had a client who really tried to provoke an argument with me over the issue of vaccines. And, what I said to him at the time was, it sounds like we both care very much about public health, and we may have different ideas about how to protect people's health, but we both care about that, don't we? And that was a really good way. Those deeper needs and values can be a good way to sort of connect, even if you have different ideas or different opinions. So, yeah, there's ways in which you can have a dialogue or a healthy debate without it becoming hostile and volatile.
How did they respond to that approach?
It kind of did help to bypass the debate and the argument, because as a therapist, I want to have a dialogue and I want to understand how people, come to the points in their life that they're at, or the views that they hold, or the dilemmas that they're struggling with. But I understand that with families, I was in the role of therapist, but with families, it can absolutely end up in these heated debates where people can end up estranged from each other.
People talk about being on the right side of history or the wrong side of history,
Yes.
But your view is different. It's we both care about history. We just have different tactics.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the Voice Referendum, and I can imagine some people may get into really difficult, heated debates with others. That's politics. They say never to talk about politics or religion with family and friends.
Why do they say that?
Well, I think what religion and politics have in common is, there are distinct and abiding different political views, and there are distinct and abiding religious views. That's why we have these political parties. We have different religions around the world, and they're not going away anytime soon because they touch on different parts of the elephant, the truth of life. One's grabbing the trunk and one's grabbing the tail, and they're saying, I've got the truth, but maybe they've just got part of the truth. And sometimes we have to live with the tension of the opposites, the fact that there are things in life that seem to contradict each other. There are differing opinions, and that creates tension. And if we can't live with that tension, we end up kind of polarizing and just grabbing onto one idea and sticking with it and shoving it down everybody's throat.
As a culture, we don't have that yin and yang symbol. We don't have that oppositional symbol anywhere in our Greco-Roman history. Is that a gap in our way of thinking?
I think so. Although in Western psychotherapy, they do talk about holding the tension of the opposites, which is that yin-yang idea, which is kind of old, out-of-vogue psychology now, like Jungian psychology, which is that life is full of paradoxes and potentially contradictions. And somehow, like we have summer and winter and day and night, we kind of need the opposites for the whole to exist. And yes, we forget that in this culture. And if we can't hold that tension and manage it and stay in dialogue, we end up, bashing each other over the head.
I've picked up a couple of things from you so far about how we can disagree amicably with people. One is to convey the idea that we both care about this subject, even though our tactics are different.
Yes.
Another is being able to hold opposites and not be so black and white. Is there anything else you can share with us about how we can disagree amicably with people?
Yeah, I would also add curiosity. So when people have come, strongly at me with their opinions, sometimes when I've been wise and mindful enough to say, how did you arrive at this position? Or how did you come to see it this way? That's curiosity. And I'm genuinely wanting to know who's influenced them, how did they come to this opinion? if I want to get into a debate immediately, then I close down my mind and my curiosity, and that doesn't always go well.
But is the curious part of our brain weaker than the tribal part of our brain, which believes in right and wrong, in-group and out-group?
Right, that's right. One's very instinctive and primitive and a bit unconscious. So we need to stay conscious. We need to try to stay mindful, particularly if it is family and friends. We're just not debating someone on the internet. If it's someone we care about and have a lot of other things in common with, let's try to be mindful and a bit more open-minded and ask questions. What led you to this conclusion, or why are you going to vote that way? Tell me more.
So psychologists have faith that we can overcome our reptile brain.
Absolutely. We need to honour our reptile brain. We need to honour our mammalian brain, but we need to honour our human prefrontal cortex brain as well, and try to slow down, pause, and, be curious.
You're listening to psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam talking about how we can just disagree with people amicably and protect those relationships even when we differ. What should agreeable people know about disagreeing? What's the danger of them masking their true opinions in order to keep the peace?
Well, I think in the long run, when we're too agreeable and we pretend we agree, or we say yes when deep down we mean no, we could end up feeling quite resentful. And resentment is a slow burn in relationships. It comes out years down the line sometimes. We might be holding it in for a long time before we lash out. And that's the risk.
So that's when the big breakdowns happen, because the introvert seems so peaceable. The other partner thinks everything is going okay until it's not all of a sudden.
Yeah, and it can almost seem like it came out of the blue, but it didn't really. It's just been building up.
Okay, so that's a bit of introvert care. What about highly opinionated extroverts? Any tips for them?
Are you talking about me, Ashwin?
Yeah, that's why we have this podcast thing. You need both in life.
So the highly opinionated extroverts. Yeah, well, I would say listen to them, be curious, what makes you think this way. But there is some assertiveness required if you're dealing with an opinionated extrovert.
What if you are the opinionated extrovert and you've got a very clear view about whether it's the voice, whether it's COVID, you know what's right, and you're going to tell every text message line, every hotline what the truth is. What should they know about to help themselves?
What to help themselves win the debate, or help themselves maybe pull back?
Yes, be healthier, because they can't be right about everything, can they?
Well, we do need to pull back. Sometimes there's a trauma response underneath, a dogged opinion, and that's for each individual to search within themselves. But sometimes we make it worse for ourselves by picking fights, pushing our ideas on everyone who'll tolerate us. And we need to ask ourselves, is this serving my inner peace? Is this lining up with my values? Is this adding value to my life? And if the answer is no, pull back, curate your news feed, change the subject, manage the content of your mind if it's not serving you to be doing that.
Pick your battles?
Pick your battles, absolutely.
What's going on when we disagree with someone over a deep topic like religion or politics, beyond the surface disagreement about the facts? Is there something else going on about status, our ego, whether we're naturally open people? What's going on under the hood?
Well, many things could be going on under the hood, such as the nature of the vast unconscious mind. But, I think there's some core needs that are probably at play very often, such as the need to be heard and the need to be understood. We all want some acknowledgement, especially if we've put a lot of thought into something, or we've had direct experiences of suffering around a certain topic. Then there's a deep yearning to be heard, to be understood, to be acknowledged, and have our experience respected. And so that's why I think we can have respectful debates and we can have respectful discussions, but as soon as they turn into contemptuous conflicts, we need to pull back whichever side we're on, because it doesn't meet our need to be respected and heard. Okay,
so a couple comes into your office, maybe they're disagreeing about the voice or COVID or anything. How does that need to be heard work in practice? If I've got one point of view, do I just say, I acknowledge what you're saying, but I think this, because they might not believe you just saying, I acknowledge what you're saying. How do you authentically hear someone and let you know that you've heard them?
Well, the first thing I would say is we need to slow down and calm down, because the more heightened we are emotionally, the more reactive we are, the less connected we are to our deeper needs and our deeper feelings. That's just physiology. So if I can get that couple to self-soothe, calm down, slow down, literally they get their heart rates down, then they're more able to listen. And make the distinction between agreeing versus empathizing or listening. Because, very often couples, family members, close friends will care about each other very much but hold very different views, and they don't have to agree. And, you mentioned ego. I think if we expect everyone to agree with us, that is our left brain taking over and our ego running the show. And I think we do have the capacity to see the oneness, to see that, we're all part of this one whole, even if we hold these different views. We can agree to disagree.
In what ways can disagreeing help in your relationship?
Well, I always say when I'm with families or in workplace mediation situations that conflict helps to make the unconscious conscious. Sometimes I don't even know what's going on for me or what I feel deeply until there's conflict. And if I can use the conflict well, then I can kind of go, oh, wow, I didn't know that about myself.
Right. Okay, because you were living on the surface before, and the conflict brought out what really matters to you.
Yeah, I think conflict's very valuable to make the unconscious conscious if we know how to do that.
Okay. Do we live in a culture that encourages to have healthy conflict, or are we supposed to suppress it?
Well, we live in a bit of a punitive culture still, right, where we're kind of deciding who's right and who's wrong. That's our justice system's predominant ideology still. And if you're wrong and to blame, we'll punish you. So that doesn't really encourage the best use of conflict, in my view. It's not restorative. But I think we are changing as a culture, and I think we are starting to see that, empathy and deeper understanding do matter. And if we can use conflict as an opportunity to try and, expand our awareness and our understanding, then that's really healthy.
Are there any types of patients or clients that you see that struggle with good disagreement? Perhaps they came from a collectivist culture where you're supposed to keep the peace, or they had a traumatic background. Mm-hmm. Do you see any patterns there with people who should pay special attention to their own psychology because they don't disagree well?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say about that excellent question is when I see couples, when any of our therapists see couples in our practice, we use a questionnaire which shows up key problematic areas in the marriage or the relationship, and it's almost always conflict management. That's one of the most common problems that couples present with, not surprisingly. And I would say definitely a trauma background will make it worse, because what happens is the limbic system on the left side of our brain is always on high alert if we've got a trauma background, and then it's informing our left thinking brain, which means we're always kind of looking for the negatives and we're always kind of looking to defend ourselves and assess for threat and danger. But it's gone, haywire. And so, we have to learn to soothe ourselves so that we can think more clearly, so that we can, and then we need skills, conflict management skills, so that we can have healthier disagreements.
So when you see someone with hardline views, is that a possible red flag that they've had a traumatic experience in their life?
Look, I don't want to generalise, but it can be. Not necessarily. There's personality differences, but it can be, for sure.
Say that it's gone past that stage. You've had a major disagreement, a falling out with a family member. What are some good ways to restore a broken relationship?
Yeah, well, if there's been a significant rupture, the first thing to do is to acknowledge that you played your part in the rupture. Don't hold yourself 100% responsible, because it takes two to tango. But acknowledge your part in it, that you had some role to play. And after a rupture comes the repair, hopefully. Unless if we had a childhood where there was just rupture after rupture with no repair, then this is a new skill for us. Healthy relationships have ruptures, but then they have the repair. So if we approach the other person with a gentle startup and say, I'd like to talk about what happened yesterday or last week or last year, and acknowledge our part in it and say sorry for your part in it, and then say, I'd like to hear from you about how that was for you and how's it been since, and is there any way we can, talk through this and, get past this? That shows an intention to heal.
We don't get a lot of rupture repair education at primary school, do we?
We don't, and it would be great if we did.
You've been listening to Dr. Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists. Actually, before I let you go, this topic of conflict resolution, the voice referendum that will be coming up at some point in the future, is there anything you'd like to leave us with as we approach that date?
Well, I think just to stay as curious. If you get into conversation that starts getting heated about this topic, try to stay curious. Try to remember that the reason we're having a referendum is because there's two sides to this story, like so many things in life. If it was clear, easy, simple and black and white, then we wouldn't be having a referendum. Some issues are complicated, and just try to hold that in mind, the tension of the opposites. Try to be open, try to be curious, ask questions, see what you can learn.
Rachel, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Ashwin.